Elias Turner had always believed that a man was only as good as the promises he kept, even when no one was watching, and on the morning the story of his life truly began, he stood alone beside his modest barn, holding a small bowl of warm stew that steamed in the cold dawn air, waiting for a child who might never return, a child he had met only once, yet felt inexplicably responsible for. The town of Red Hollow called him a fool for it, feeding an Apache child, showing softness in a land built on suspicion and hard edges, but Elias had lived long enough to see how fear twisted the hearts of men, and he wanted no part in that. He had simply found the boy thin as a whisper, shivering beneath the mesquite trees 2 nights earlier, scavenging near his property, and instead of chasing him off with a rifle like most farmers would, he offered him food. No questions. No conditions. Just a warm meal and a chance for the boy to breathe easy. The child had stared at him with dark, wide, frightened eyes, unsure whether to run or collapse. Eventually, hunger overpowered fear, and the boy ate the stew with trembling hands, glancing repeatedly toward the horizon where the mountains touched the sky, as if expecting someone to come for him. Before leaving, the boy pointed to the stew, then to his own chest, then to Elias, and tapped his heart twice, a gesture Elias did not understand at the time, but felt deeply nonetheless. The boy left into the night without a sound, and despite everything the town said, Elias kept a second bowl ready the next morning. And the next. And that was the moment, as he waited once again, when a distant but unmistakable shape appeared over the ridge, not a child this time, but dozens of riders, their silhouettes sharp and majestic against the rising sun. Red Hollow had always feared the Apache, had whispered stories of raids and retaliation, but Elias felt something different stir in his chest, curiosity, not dread, because he had seen the gentleness in the boy's eyes, and he sensed that what approached was not an attack, but an answer. The riders came steadily, forming a long line that stretched across the plains like an unfolding ribbon of earth and power. Dust rose behind their horses, shimmering gold in the early light, and soon, the entire town began to spill from their homes, shopkeepers, ranch hands, blacksmiths, mothers still in their nightgowns, every one of them wide-eyed and trembling as the Apache procession advanced, unified, silent, purposeful. Sheriff Harlan ran to Elias, shouting for him to hide or arm himself, but Elias only shook his head, clutching the bowl tighter, the steam rising in tender spirals. "They're not coming for war," he said softly, though he had no proof beyond the calm in his bones. The sheriff swore under his breath and ordered the townsfolk to stay back, yet curiosity held them fixed in place. As the Apache riders finally halted before Elias's farm, the air grew still, the kind of silence that presses on the ears like a held breath. A man stepped forward, their leader, unmistakable by the feathers woven into his braids and the ancient gravity in his gaze. He sat astride his horse like the land itself had carved him from stone. For a moment, neither he nor Elias moved. Then, from behind the riders, the child emerged, the same boy Elias had fed, running forward with a bright, relieved cry, tapping his heart twice before pointing at Elias. The chief dismounted, approached the farmer, and bowed his head slightly, a gesture that stunned everyone watching. "You fed my grandson," he said, his English rough but steady. "In a time when your people fear ours, when mistrust grows like weeds, you offered kindness with no expectation." Elias swallowed, feeling suddenly small beneath the weight of so many watching eyes. "A hungry child is a hungry child," he answered simply. "Doesn't matter where he's from." The chief studied him for a long moment, then lifted his hand and signaled. What happened next would be spoken of in Red Hollow for generations. Wagons began rolling forward from behind the Apache riders, large, heavy wooden carts filled to the brim with sacks of corn, cured meat, dried beans, tools, blankets, and medicinal plants. The Apaches unloaded them in silence, forming neat stacks beside the startled townsfolk. The chief's voice carried through the crisp morning air, "You fed one of ours. We feed all of yours." Gasps rippled across the crowd. The sheriff stood frozen. Mothers pulled their children close, unsure whether to trust what they saw. Elias felt his throat tighten as he looked at the gathering generosity spread across the earth like an offering. The chief continued, "This world grows harsher by season. Drought comes. Illness comes. But kindness is still a path between families, if men choose to walk it." The riders nodded, as if exhaling years of tension in that single unified gesture. For the first time in Red Hollow's memory, they did not feel like strangers, they felt like neighbors. The child tugged on Elias's shirt, pointing eagerly toward the wagons, urging him to look. When Elias knelt beside him, the boy touched his own chest again and tapped twice, then touched Elias's heart. He says, the chief interpreted, that his spirit recognizes yours. The farmer's eyes burned with sudden warmth he wasn't prepared for. Behind them, something extraordinary unfolded. Townsfolk began stepping forward timidly, offering hesitant smiles, murmured thanks, handshakes, and in some cases, tentative apologies for years of mistrust that had been built on fear rather than truth. The Apache accepted every gesture with calm dignity. Some of the women approached the town's doctor, showing him rare healing plants they had brought, teaching him how to use them. Others spoke with the blacksmith about metalwork. Children peeked out from behind their mothers' skirts, inching closer to the Apache children who smiled back shyly until they were soon running together in the dust like all children do when adults are not looking, without fear, without borders, without the weight of history. Elias watched this transformation with a swelling heart. Just days earlier, Red Hollow had been a place tangled in prejudice, where suspicion cast long shadows over every relationship. Yet now, food and friendship exchanged hands like water breaking a long drought, and something deep within the collective heart of the town seemed to crack open, letting years of distrust seep out into the earth. When the sun rose higher, painting the plains in warm gold, the chief turned to Elias once more. "You kept your word to a hungry child," he said. "We keep our word to those who walk in honor." Today, Red Hollow is fed. Not by charity, but by respect. Tears blurred Elias's vision as he looked at the bounty spread before his neighbors. "I only did what any decent man should," he murmured. "Not all men choose the decent path," the chief replied. "But the ones who do, change the course of many lives, not just their own." It was then that an unexpected moment of realization struck Elias, a profound, anchoring truth that would shape everything that followed. He had fed the child because it felt right, but the gift he received in return was not just food for the town, it was the restoration of faith, the mending of a broken bridge between two worlds, the proof that one small act of kindness could ripple outward until it touched entire communities. As the Apaches prepared to depart, leaving behind enough supplies to sustain Red Hollow through the winter, the townsfolk lined up along the road in a spontaneous gesture of gratitude. Some placed hands over their hearts. Others bowed their heads. The child ran back to Elias one last time, wrapping small arms around his waist before climbing onto his grandfather's horse. And as the tribe rode away, the entire town felt as though a new chapter had opened, one built not on fear and division, but on mutual respect and shared humanity. By nightfall, Red Hollow glowed with a spirit it had never known. Families gathered in the center of town, cooking meals from the Apache provisions, sharing stories, laughing, crying, and acknowledging that something extraordinary had happened that day. Children reenacted the arrival of the riders with sticks as pretend spears and blankets as horses, women prepared stews thicker and richer than anything they'd tasted in years, and men who had once muttered distrustful words about the Apache now sat with softened eyes, humbled by the tribe's generosity and ashamed of their own assumptions. Elias stood quietly beside his barn, looking up at the stars that stretched across the sky like tiny campfires of light. He felt a warmth swell inside him, deeper than pride, softer than joy. A sense of purpose fulfilled, of a promise kept not only to a child, but to the better version of himself he always hoped to be. And in that quiet moment, he realized something even more profound. Kindness does not end where it is given, it travels, it spreads, it multiplies, until the world becomes just a little gentler than it was before. Red Hollow would long remember the day the Apache riders fed the whole town, but Elias knew the truth. The miracle began not with 100 warriors, but with one frightened child, one bowl of stew, and one simple choice to do good when no one else would. And that, he thought as the evening wind rustled the grass, was how humanity should always begin: one heart seeing another, one stranger helping another, one small act reminding the world that hope is still alive, waiting only for someone to share it.